Hey, folks. So I'm seeing more and more articles reinforcing the idea that there's going to be a severe recession coming. Um, I think I've counted somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 articles I've read just in the past 2 days. Uh, on CNBC, the Dow closes out its worst day in 3 months, falls more than 700 points as recession fears grow. After new data showed retail sales declined more than expected in November, raising fears that the Federal Reserve's relentless interest rate hikes are tipping the economy into a recession. Uh, the Dow closed below 34,000 on Wednesday, and then the selling intensified on Thursday, following the poor retail sales data, and even continued on into Friday. Treasury yields continued to defy the Fed and fall on fears the central bank is going too far. The 10-year Treasury yield fell below 3.5%. On Yahoo Finance, stocks plunge after rate hikes. Weak retail sales rattle markets. Uh, this is actually goes beyond the United States economy. Um, it makes similar comparisons with the European economy. The European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde echoed a hawkish tune from Fed Chair Jerome Powell following the Monetary Authority's rate decision. Anybody who thinks that this is a pivot for the ECB is wrong, Lagarde said in a news conference. We should expect to raise interest rates at a 50 basis point pace for a period of time. We have more ground to cover. We have longer to go, and we are in for a long game, she said. Meanwhile, the U.S. government's retail sales report showed spending fell sharply in November as the key holiday shopping season kicked off. The latest retail sales reading showed a decline of 0.6% over the prior month, but a 6.5% increase from the same period last year. That's not saying much because we were under lockdowns last year. So to say to try to spin that increase as a positive thing is not really saying that much. Black Friday and holiday shopping weren't enough to save retail sales last month, as they decreased the most this year and came in well below expectations, Morgan Stanley's head of model portfolio construction, Mike Loengart, said in a note. That's just two examples of multiple articles that I've read over the past 2 or 3 days that are reinforcing the concept that we're heading into a deep, deep recession within the first half of next year, most likely. Most of the articles I read are predicting it to be about in the middle of next year, but I'm expecting it could potentially be as early as the first quarter, the first 3 months or so. Anytime after that first 3 months, we should be well into the area where we could go into a deep recession. And as I've said in the past, given the state of the economy, the state of our supply chains, I really don't think this is going to be just a recession. Some people are saying it's going to be a mild recession. We're going to have a soft landing. I don't buy that for a second. It's just, if it was going to be a soft landing and a mild recession, you wouldn't have so many people yelling about it. I heard one economist say one time that whenever you hear a lot of people talking about something's going to happen, it's going to happen, simply because the mindset that people get, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the majority of people feel that they're going to have a stock market crash or a recession, people are going to get scared to spend money. They're going to start spending as frugally as possible. They're going to think twice about buying things that they don't need. And that in turn is going to compound over time as more people get scared of a recession. and then it's actually going to cause one to happen. So you've got this mentality that people are expecting a recession, so they get cautious. And the more cautious people get, the stock market takes a hit and drops because of declining sales. And that stokes even more fear of a recession. And it's just like a snowball rolling downhill. It just builds on itself, and it's going to happen. We're beyond the point of if it's going to happen. It's going to happen. The question is, when will it happen, which nobody can predict, and how bad will it be? You've got a lot of people out there predicting that it's going to be a mild recession with a soft landing. I don't buy that. What I'm seeing, and again, just for the record, I'm no economist, I'm no financial expert, I'm no financial advisor, but even I can see we're spending money like crazy. The supply chains can barely keep up as is, and the Fed is hiking interest rates extremely aggressively. People are getting laid off. People are actually starting to stop spending. They're not spending as much as a lot of people expected them to because of the layoffs, because of the high interest rates and what have you. Again, it's just a self-feeding cycle. This is not going to be, in my opinion, this is not going to be a mild recession. I've said it before, this is going to be a deep recession, possibly even another Great Depression. And a lot of people would tell you that it's going to be as bad, if not worse, than the Great Depression of the 30s. And we all know that the Great Depression of the 30s also led into World War II. It was a contributing factor. It certainly wasn't the only factor, but it was a contributing factor. We're seeing a repetition of that cycle here, a similar pattern forming here. We've had an economic crisis with the housing crisis of 2008, 2009, and then with the pandemic. Similar to what followed the boom of the 20s and then the stock market crash of the 30s. I'd say if you put them side by side, we're probably right before the market crashed in the 30s. So we're just before that event happened in the pattern. What would come next is a severe crash. Now, we're already seeing people, or countries rather, are on a war footing. You know, you've got different militaries building up, posturing, making threats, trying to advance their weapons programs. You've got Russia invaded Ukraine. You've got a lot of positioning there. You've got conflicts between India and China on their border. You've got tensions in the Pacific with China and Taiwan. And that brings me to my next article, or next two articles, on U.S. News. The pacifist country of Japan unveils biggest military buildup since World War II. Tokyo, Reuters. Japan on Friday unveiled its biggest military buildup since World War II with a $320 billion plan that will buy missiles capable of striking China and ready it for sustained conflict as regional tensions and Russia's Ukraine invasion stoke war fears. Kishida's plan will double. This is not the full article. I've just selected a few excerpts from the articles. Kishida's plan will double defense outlays to about 2% of gross domestic product over 5 years, blowing past a self-imposed 1% spending limit that has been in place since 1976. It will increase the Defense Ministry's budget to around a tenth of all public spending at current levels. So Japan is going to start spending around a tenth of its public spending on military. It will make Japan the world's third biggest military spender after the United States and China, based on current budgets. That splurge will provide work to Japanese military equipment makers such as Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, which is expected to lead development of 3 of the longer-range missiles that will be part of Japan's new missile force. MHI, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, will also build Japan's next jet fighter alongside BAE Systems plc and Leonardo SPA in a joint project between Japan, Britain, and Italy announced last week. Tokyo allocated $5.6 billion for that in 5-year defense program. Foreign companies will also benefit. Japan says it wants ship-launched U.S. Tomahawk cruise missiles made by Raytheon Technologies to be part of its new deterrence force. Other items on Japan's military shopping list over the next 5 years include interceptor missiles for ballistic missile defense, attack and reconnaissance drones, satellite communications equipment, Lockheed Martin F-35 stealth fighters, helicopters, submarines, warships, and heavy lift transport jets. The next article, this comes from South Dakota Public Radio. Eyeing China, Japan lifts longtime restrictions to allow major defense buildup. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin, meanwhile, accused Tokyo of hyping up the China threat to find an excuse for its military buildup. Okay, the problem with that is that for decades, Japan has been kind of a pacifist nation, trying to avoid any kind of military buildup. Because they have made agreements that they wouldn't develop any kind of offensive technology. So here, China is accusing Tokyo of hyping up the threat just to find an excuse for the buildup. I don't think so, because everybody knows China is eyeing Taiwan. There's a lot of tension there between China and the U.S. over Taiwan's independence. And if there is a conflict between the U.S. and China over Taiwan, the U.S. has already stated it will help defend Taiwan. Japan is right there in the area. They're going to be on the front lines of this conflict. They're just, from my point of view, they're just taking whatever steps they need to make sure that they'll be able to defend themselves and their security. They'll be able to maintain their security in the event of an attack. You know, you would be a fool not to be prepping for a conflict in that area. Continuing on with this excerpt, the policy is outlined in revisions to 3 national security strategy documents. The documents also calls for boosting defense spending to roughly 2% of gross domestic product by 2027, after decades of being capped at 1%. So they're doubling their, they're actually more than doubling. They're at 1%, and they're talking about being at like 10%, so that's quite an increase. The money would go to import missiles from the United States, such as Tomahawk cruise missiles, capable of reaching North Korea and parts of China. Japan also plans to develop its own weapons, including advanced fighter jets, hypersonic missiles, and armed drones. Japanese media have reported on some of the purchase plans, citing the nation's defense ministry. Japanese politicians are debating where the money to fund the increase will come from. It's the biggest shift in Japan's defense policy since its cabinet reinterpreted the Constitution in 2014 to allow the military to fight in support of an ally under attack. Now that's important there as well, because back in 2014 they reinterpreted their own constitution to allow their military to fight in support of an ally under attack. This is a step closer to strengthening an allied relationship between Japan, the U.S., potentially Taiwan, and other countries. Obviously, Britain and Italy are going to be in close relationship with Japan as well, since they're going to be working in joint on the new Japanese jet fighter project. So again, what we're seeing, what we saw back in the 20s and 30s, we saw a stock market boom, then we saw a crash, and then we led into World War II. Now, that's oversimplifying it, but we're seeing a similar pattern here. We had a major boom. There was a great boom under Trump, admittedly. Uh, if you say there wasn't an economic boom under Trump, you're just not being honest with yourself. You're letting your feelings for an individual color your entire outlook on the situation as a whole. There was an economic boom under Trump until COVID hit. When the pandemic hit, spending went from bad to worse. Then we started talking about lockdowns and all kinds of things like that. Biden took over, lockdowns and all that got worse. The economy got worse. And it could be said that they're trying to, or they could potentially be looking at instituting more lockdowns this winter, because we're starting to see a lot of talk in the news about spikes in COVID, particularly in China. And we all know that what started in China, it took about 2 to 3 months for it to make its way to the rest of the world. So hopefully that won't happen again, but potentially it could. But every time we turn around, every time we think we're making progress against this, they start talking about new restrictions, or they try to stoke new fears of the pandemic returning. And right now, we've already got this tension in the Pacific with Taiwan, China, the U.S., and Russia. I mean, not Russia, but Japan. And then we have the conflict with Russia and Ukraine, which is involving the U.S. and NATO indirectly. So from my perspective, in my opinion, we're it's not exactly the same, but in a very similar position that the world was in prior to World War II. So we need to be aware that we're right there on the edge of it, folks. This could easily lead us into World War III. I hate to say that right now. I mean, a lot of people use that to hype their channels. I'm not trying to do that. I know I've mentioned World War III before, but we are so close to it right now. If you look at the way countries are jockeying position, moving things around, adjusting their budgets, making accusations, it's almost like watching a chessboard. You can see pieces moving around. And unfortunately, the outcome that I'm seeing is leading towards World War III. I certainly hope it doesn't happen. If anybody is actually hoping for a World War III, you're out of your mind. Nobody in their right mind should want a world war to happen, particularly now, with the technology and the weaponry available. There's tension between the U.S. and the European Union right now because of the Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. I've seen reports that Europe is concerned that it's going to pull business away from Europe into the United States because of the tax breaks and tax credits available to green energy companies. So they're talking about how the European Union needs a serious response to Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. So, there's tension all over the place. It's not good. It's really not good. I'm not one to want conflict, but what's that old proverb that said the old warrior said he would rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. So that's kind of the philosophy I follow. It's like I don't want to be in a war, period. But I would rather be trained and prepared for war and try to avoid it than be thrust into the middle of a conflict with no training, no preparation. I mean, it's as simple as that. So it's my belief that what you need to be focusing on right now, as always, I've said this multiple times, food, water, power backups, the basics. Cover your basics. Your medical supplies. But also, if you're the type, if you are actually into weapons, firearms, shooting, the Second Amendment, what have you, you should probably be making sure you have what weapons you need or suspect you'll need, and be stocking ammo for those weapons. I'm not trying to stoke fear here. That's the last thing I want to do. But if we look at this objectively, this is the direction everything is leading into. And again, it's better to be prepared and not need it than need it and not have it. So I would err on the caution of prepping. If there's any way possible, make sure you've got all your basics covered. Again, food, water, medical supplies, power backup, hygiene, you name it, self-defense. It's getting grim, folks. It seems like every day there's more news that we're headed closer and closer to a global conflict. And the sad thing is, it almost seems like those in power want this to happen. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me because it's my belief, some might call it a conspiracy theory. There's a lot of people out there that believe that the attack on Pearl Harbor was allowed to happen so it would draw the U.S. into the conflict and hopefully pull us out of the Depression, which in reality that actually worked. Whether it was the right thing to do or not, that's up for argument. I would say not, but it looks like we're on that same path again. And it looks like there's a lot of people in power that, for some reason, really want us to get into a conflict with Russia and China. I mean, Biden and the Senate, Biden and Congress, they've already approved a spending bill, a defense spending bill that includes a massive amount of spending or funding for Ukraine. They're getting ready to send more missiles over there. So this is not toning down at all. This is continuing to ramp up a little bit every single day. So if all these different countries, all these different governments are preparing for war, maybe you should too. Just think about it that way. If they're preparing for war, maybe you should too. That's all I've got. I hope you found this useful. I appreciate you guys watching. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't. I'll get some more videos out to you ASAP. And until then, folks, stay busy, be productive, keep prepping, take care of yourselves and your family. And until next time, I'll catch you later.